What? Beautiful. All right, Lauren, you and I today.
Hello, hello.
One of the, I was going to say it before this, but I'll say it now. Is like, I come today out, Mihal's joining in is like when there's only topics that I've picked, and then it's like only, for example, you and I get scared of this. It's just Tyler talking the whole time. And, that's all. And I've been working on trying to embed live transcription into Speak. And I hope that we can actually have it live in Zoom one day. And that transcription will say, Mihal, thanks for joining, sir. The transcription will say, like, break down the talk time. So you'll get like a little red flag that says when you're crossing, say, like 50% talk time. It's almost like a warning to shut up,
Yeah, it gives you like a timer, like on the side, shows you like how long you've been talking.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a big piece in sales, but, also in conversations like this, sometimes, like now that I've got everything on Spotify, I listen back to them sometimes the day of, especially because I'm playing soccer and I'm driving out a little bit and I listen on the way there and back. My God, damn it, Tyler, you talk too much. And trying my best. So I get scared when, first of all, when I thought it was just Lauren and I, and also when I'm the only one bringing topics. So I'm going to try my best here today. Lauren, how are you, sir? Anything to add from the top here?
I'm feeling pretty good. I want to talk some more about this no-code solution and like what other people in the industry represent themselves as no-code and what that really means, whether or not it's good or bad.
Beautiful. Okay, Nihal, anything off the top from you, sir?
No, I'm sorry. I just got caught up in research, and then I was like,
hey,
"Wait,
that's okay. That's all good. Research is important."
No. I mean, are we jumping right into this topic?
We're recording, sir.
Okay. Let me think. I think when it comes to no code and no code solutions, there's always this conversation around, if with no code, you don't even need a developer to like release a SaaS. And I think there's a certain level of truth there where it's like, sure, to release and maybe kind of launch MVP versions of your ideas. I think no code solutions are powerful. And, I think, for example, with a solution like Speak, where it is a no code transcription and insights engine, right? It gives you as perhaps, or us, I guess, as non-technical people, the ability to actually build out our ideas and build out working products without the need to rely necessarily on a highly technical person to kind of realize our vision, right? And I think that that's the ethos of the entire like no code movement, where it's like you as a non-technical person, if you have an idea or you have a workflow that you would like to explore or build out, you can basically do that with a relatively friendly user interface and basic understanding of things like APIs and kind of automation workflows. So in this space, I guess I have seen references, for example, to like something like Otter as no code, which makes sense, right? Like this is all no code transcription because there's a front end built for you. But I almost hesitate to call Otter no code because you can actually plug them into anything. Like you can use them as a standalone app, but compared to us, where we actually give you an API if you want to use us as a speech to text and analysis engine for your project or product, whatever that may be. You have that means to do so. As for other players in the space, I'm not sure, Tyler, if you have people in mind that you'd call a no code solution that do things that we do.
Looking up, like one of the big no code brands is like Bubble, and I found a demo sort of tutorial of how you can hook into, I think, AWS for transcription. Now, there would seem like there was a lot of code involved, and this is where I find the lines of no code versus low code versus code / versus just software to be a little blurry. Is no code really just software that enables people to do things, which is always what we've built, and now there's just a label? Like, is this like a metaverse label that's just thrown on top of something and it's a new buzzword that's really just doing the same thing as before? Not really. I've seen like no code NLP platforms, but I would say most of those are for more like hardcore training of models, like neural space is one that I was just looking at. And then there's like Google sort of auto ML and some sort of platforms that Google is delivering where it's very codeless. Now you still maybe have knowledge of Python and machine learning, but overall they're trying to reduce the amount of, yeah, just like raw code that you're managing within that process.
As you think about something, I guess, like voice flow, where,
Yeah.
would you consider them no code or low code?
Yeah, like I mean, and that's the power of what they've done, right? Like to build a voice automation and to integrate with Alexa and Google, at least previously was a very code intensive, developer intensive process, and they've now, made it very drag and drop intuitive interface and allowed a whole new audience of people. I think they're almost at 100,000 probably sort of companies and users, and that's a beautiful thing. And we talked about it this week, which was just like, with what I wanted to do to speak, I feel like I completed at least some milestones of what I was trying to achieve. And when I was earlier trying to do it and figuring out, for just as a small example, like analyzing Evernote notes, it was very frustrating not to be able to do that. So there was a lot of pain there, and I'm glad that I've solved that for myself, but also that we're solving this for other people and enabling a lot of capabilities and advancements for dealing with language data that weren't necessarily possible unless you're a big company with a bunch of developers or data scientists there. So I'd like to ask, like, maybe Lauren even too, like when you hear the term no code, is there a company that you think of? Like, is there one that sticks out to you?
Mostly just like Squarespace or like
Yeah.
Just automated like website builders. We kind of just drag and drop things around. But as far as like actual like applications, Bubble seems to be, yeah, again, standing out. But that's also a bit confusing. It seems like so complicated that you have to have some understanding of code even to get into it. Like when I think of like no code, it's like someone who has no idea what HTML, CSS, any of that really is. But I'm not really sure like where the boundary is there. And depending on like what you're trying to do, like how big that boundary can grow to be.
That's the one that really stuck out to me first. Like I would say, besides this label, like the first no code experience that I had, which was like page builders and like WordPress with like Divi or Elementor, which, I had been able to hard code websites in the past, but to be able to like rapid prototype and do designs while building the code in real time was unlocked a lot of power. Now people would say that that's also unlocked a generation of heavy, similar looking websites. But overall, there was a whole class of people who could not do this before that were then enabled to do that, and a massive ecosystem of value that was created. So that excites me. That's something that excites 𝗏𝗁. I wish, 𝗏𝗁 was here today, so we had a little bit more of the developer perspective in this, because there is these blurry lines, and maybe it's something that we need to sort of conclude and sort of finalize a little bit more to move forward. But maybe 𝗏𝗁, any thoughts, on a company that's really sticking out to you or what this means?
No, I think, for example, my thoughts around no code really, maybe revolve around this idea of baseline building, right? Where I think even when you look at these website builders and Elementor, Webflow, Squarespace, whatever they are, I think they're valid tools up to a certain point, and there may be scale up tools, but then I think once you're, or maybe they're more MVP tools, right? But then once you're in like a scale up phase, just for example, looking at what we build and how we build and process and all difficulties that go into figuring out, specific workflows and specific technical details. Maybe this is me being short-sighted, but I find it very difficult to see how let's say an average individual would be able to take a no-code tool and build it into, let's say, a $50 million company with zero technical expertise or zero technical backing, zero technical help, right? So I think it's very possible to scale to a certain point with no code tech. Let's say you're just building a micro SaaS, right? I think no code is amazing for micro SaaS. Oh my goodness, my language. Micro SaaS tools. And then, you kind of jump to this enterprise level where I think no code is also very useful in these enterprise scenarios where, as one person in a 20,000 person company, let's say, you don't want to, or you don't have the means to like get an entire team to adopt something. But let's say for your small team, you want to build a tool or build a workflow that improves your process. You have the means to easily create that and maybe create validation for mass adoption at your company. And I think that's really where the strength of a lot of no code lies in my opinion. It's building out these MVPs, scaling it to a certain point, and then once you've scaled it enough, or you realize that there's technical limitations to maybe some of the no code tools or no code workflows, then you can kind of bring in more technical talent to help you build out maybe a proprietary version of what you've built. But the other side to that is I think there's people that will never need to reach that point, right? There's people where their business, their kind of business workflow, or the tasks they're trying to get done, no-code tools are perfect solutions for them, right? Because they're complex enough that, to kind of code something or build something to do that task, they'd have to spend way too much money developing it themselves. But having a ready-made tool that, let's say, takes their 10-hour process and turns it into a 30-minute process, I think that is a really powerful thing that, when it's amplified among, let's say, 100,000 people, 1 million people, whatever it is, that really has a compounding effect, even if it's not necessarily utilized at a very at the very top, or if it's not really distributed throughout a company's hierarchy either.
I think people also underestimate obviously the time that it takes to build something with your own code, but I would also say also but also just like the management of that. Like if you built, say, that's why people switch to dynamic, platforms like, say, again, WordPress or things like that, because they would update constantly. And if you just built that, libraries could change, PHP that the server was hosting on could change. There's this ongoing maintenance that is required. And hopefully, some of the, value proposition of a no-code solution of maybe say something like Squarespace is like, you don't need to worry about that because they're updating things, they're responsible for making sure there's not conflicts. Now, you run into something like WordPress where there's a lot of conflicts because people just pushing plugins to their site, but overall that system has an engine that then updates and allows you to not have to maintain things yourself in the same way. So I do, I have a concern, like one of the questions I had around this, which is like, say I'm a developer, because, I sort of laid out like what some of our best contracts have been developers or developer focused. So they tap into APIs, processing generally more media. They're more technically savvy. Maybe they have more budgets or, just people who are talented at executing on projects. And so say they land on our site and they say, they see no code transcription and natural language processing. Is that a turnoff? I don't know the answer to that. And again, that's what's not here to help give us that answer, but it's something I have a little bit of concern about. So I'm not sure if you have the thoughts on that in particular.
I mean, I'd say even like Monkey Learn, maybe not right on their homepage, but they definitely have a number of pages where they tout themselves as being no code or low code, right? And I mean, I guess anyone that has worked with Monkey Learn or knows Monkey Learn, you might need to turn off and there you go.
Just keep moving around.
I know. People know that it's not like some, simple software that doesn't, it doesn't have complex things going on behind the scene. And I think what you said there, maybe for me to backtrack a little bit, it's not that I think no code tech can scale very well, but where I think the value prop in no code is you have these technical people that have built something that has high usability for non-technical people, but then obviously when there's issues that like a non-technical person might run into with this no-code solution, the technical people are there to actually augment that experience and help them through that step, right? Because even something like Squarespace, for the most part, if you're just running a blog or you're running something small scale, you'll probably never have to interact with Squarespace support or like, like Squarespace's technical team, Squarespace's advertising team, whatever that might be. But once you reach a certain level of scale, those are all additional technical components that you might not be able to afford on your own. But now, you have a team that has been built around this solution for you that you can leverage to actually improve your experience with this no-code tool as well. So I'm sorry, I know this was backtracking a bit, but to your point about turning off developers, I think, it's the same way with any fad or buzzword, right? Like, for example, when all these like NLP, not NLP, like GPT-3 apps were coming out, right? Everyone was, oh, it's the end of writers, end of copywriter. And it's like, no, right? Like it's a tool to augment or maybe get rid of some of the more tedious basic tasks that, those roles entail. Same thing with development. I think no code's very powerful in minimizing the amount of baseline building they have to do, right? So that repetitive structural building that they might not need to do anymore. It doesn't make sense to build from scratch when you have a pre-made solution that you just plug into your platform, right? You see it, you think about things like help desks, right? Product tours, product analytics. These are all systems you could build for yourself, but why would you, right? Like it's to that mindset, there's so much effort that went into building this very user-friendly thing that is friendly for obviously non-technical people, but I think also just improves the lives of technical people where they're not spending time on menial tasks and they get to focus on these kind of more complex problems that excite them and engage them and actually, help them move technology forward. And I think I was reading something somewhere about how, no code isn't going to get rid of developers. It's just going to change how or what developers and programmers build, right? So instead of,
how much time they devote to certain projects.
Exactly. So instead of, focusing on, let's say the front end of your app, right? Like, let's say you're building like a NFT app, right? you don't need to focus so much on the front end. Instead, you can actually focus on improving, like it's a problem, I guess, not a problem, but something that we talk about all the time. It's like, there's not enough time in the world to, especially with a lean team, to focus on both your front end and your back end elements. So it's like, if there was a way, let's say, to eliminate any and all front end related work and just work on kind of improving, our insights engine, our kind of NLP, our NER, like all these aspects that actually improve the product overall, why wouldn't the developer take that, right? Because it's almost like, oh, I don't need to, figure out this Flexbox, or I don't need to figure out, the padding on this one card. Right now, all I need to figure out is, how do I take input and give you something that you actually care about, right? In the sense of like a valuable output, which is, something we keep talking about. And, not to speak for 𝗲𝗁, but we've definitely seen times where, the front end issues that might pop up can be quite frustrating for someone like him, where he cares about it, but he also has 200 other things on the go, right?
Oh, yeah. As you said, it sort of, I guess it changes some of the priorities, if that's the ambition that you have to focus on the UI experience, and really everything is optimized to enable someone who is not a developer to create value. So, that's hard, but I think that is also where value is created. You go to places where things are hard, you solve that, and that's where value is created. So that's something that we're going to continue to lean into. And just there are two other examples quickly that stick out to me. I love, one of our friends, Lauren, they built almost their entire business off Airtable. And they have very simple, text fields and forms, but they've also got very complex scripts that some of the more technical people on their team have built in Python that automate everything. Like, it's insane, what has actually happened there. And then I think, one of the greatest examples that we've ever seen of this is 𝗲𝗲𝗄𝗧. I think it's supposed to rhyme with happier. That's a tough thing. But that company has enabled so many people to do things that just were not possible before. And you can still, end up in a little bit of a pinch on 𝗲𝗲𝗄𝗧, where you are like, I need to do a little bit of scripting or a little bit of, maybe it's not quite coding, but some extraction of specific data or outputs to then make the automation complete. And I think generally, though, to replicate that functionality would be a very expensive, time-consuming process, and there's a lot of a lot of value and time saved there, and then money saved there. So I do think there's a lot of value proposition here. I am interested in this idea of like buzzwords and labels being slapped on things that are, a few years ago, AI was the buzzword. And, AI continues to be, obviously, in machine learning and AI and NLP and computer vision, all this stuff is not going anywhere, but really a lot of projects that are, deeply research driven and not in the end creating business value sometimes don't end up the way that people think they hope to be. So one company quickly was a company, Element AI, attracted some of the best AI researchers teams in the world. So much money poured into that. And I'm not exactly sure where they are, but I believe there were some layoffs and a lot of pivots that came out of that because they just got so deep into technical AI research porn that they didn't deliver business value, and they also thought that they could build sort of general purpose engines that would create value for different industries. And obviously that was a problem too. And that's something that we bumped up against. So, okay, have we beat this topic to death? Any other points on no code or any other thoughts here?
I think just as a final point too, leading into that idea of saving time to do the work that truly matters to your end results, right? Like we've even had part of why we're really driven towards this goal of eliminating maybe analysis paralysis, or just eliminating the kind of grunt work that needs to be done to get good insights is, we work with a lot of people doing important research. They ingest and capture like hundreds, if not thousands of hours of like language data. And, depending on the size of their team, depending on the scope of the research, they don't actually have the time or the means to actually parse through all that data, right? So, we've actually seen this quite recently where, one of our customers was struggling to basically get through all the data that they were collecting from people they were interviewing. And what was it? It was basically, I would love to get a digest of like all the interviews that we processed this week, right? And I think for us, it's something that they could build out themselves if they chose to or had the means to, but clearly it's not something that's either a priority or something that is really within the scope of what they know to do. So for us to be the means to an end, right? Like the medium by which people are able to truly do the work that matters to them is very powerful, and a good goal, I think, for a lot of companies, ourselves included, to work towards, right?
Just along that vein, like one thing I also am finding sort of demonstrated in this specific example with this customer, like I remember when I was running the agency 6.5, and someone would come with, a goal. Obviously the goal was generally, I want to make more money. I'm going to pay some Google ads and set that up. But like, there was a lot of lack of clarity in that ask. You know what I mean? So it would be like, hey, well, do you have analytics set up so that you can track if an ad worked or not? How many people come to your website and submit on the contact form? If someone submits on the contact form, how many people of those do you close into a sale? If someone closes on a sale, how much is that sale worth? And you'd have to especially with small businesses or early stage companies, you have to have all these probing questions that are clarifying. And by you clarifying, it's also clarifying for them sort of the value of the engagement that you hope, and also define what success was. And in this specific example, I also tried to sort of ask some clarifying questions and also provide some examples of here's what's possible. And I think what the challenge is here is people think that what is possible, and maybe one day it is like, hey, I dump 100 interviews in and it just spits out gold. And that's what we want to accomplish, but there's a lot of things that need to go right in that process. Again, transcription accuracy, proper speaker labels. You have to know in some case maybe give us some examples of the kind of insights that you're looking for, because there's so much data in 100 conversations and interviews that so much noise is created. So how do we separate that and give you the signal of what it is? And I think there needs to be something clarified there for our users as they onboard of what they're looking for. And I think it also comes back to, what we've talked about last week, and we saw a great example of is, what if we had just given this user the Google search-like function, and they literally just could go in and ask a question? Now, do we need to give them, like the one example that we saw, they were giving them prompted questions. So basically, like almost like we give a little synthesis of data and say, here's, out of what we've seen, here's maybe some interesting questions to ask, just to give like the sort of the juices flowing in the brain.
And then
like,
is this useful or not? Right.
Exactly. Like, because out of this engagement, and it left me feeling a little sad, to be honest. I was just like, if you give me a bit more clarity on what you are looking to get out of this, then we might be able to give you this insights, in 2 hours and not 20 hours, because it might just be a little configuration of the display of this data. And so I think for us, it's actually our role to help people clarify and drive along that path so that real value is created, and hopefully, again, repeatable. So if this, a customer has another 100 interviews that they're uploading, that the same level of quality or even better quality is achieved.
A lot of people think that like no code means like you don't really do anything whatsoever, but there is quite a lot of input that still needs to be like translated in a way. And it's just a matter of making it as simple. Like, I think a lot of the most popular no code solutions is just drag and drop. It's not even a matter of typing anything really, but yeah, it's probably going to get even more and more simpler. And then eventually when we have all of our brains hooked up to computers, we just think and then things appear.
Well, and what people are really dealing with in a way is like what you're dealing with, one, which is like a raw CSV of data that then we're trying to format in different ways and hopefully unlock value in that. But if there's 10,000 rows of data, there are then filters needed to put on to reveal, out of these 10,000, what are the 100 lines that I actually care about. And this sort of mechanism that we're trying to enable is, okay, we're automatically going to categorize some of this information: people, brands, location, numbers, destinations, blah, blah, blah. But if that's not enough for you, then we need to move to another layer of value. And in a healthcare example, we've seen, for example, symptoms and diagnostic codes and like the medicine that they're taking. And in advertising or marketing, it's commercial intent. It's different sort of. So we're trying to enable that path, but where I think real value is created is that they don't have to worry about that path. We are just doing our best, and maybe there's some configurations that we need to add when someone signs up or when they dump a big volume of media in. It's like, I'm a marketer, I'm looking for insights on X, and then that then sort of curates the analysis and the insights. Because the other thing I've learned from this process is if like you just spent 100 hours doing interviews, you really don't want to go back and listen to all this information again. Like, you've had it, you're done. You just want synthesis and value. So that's a challenge that we're so close, but we're not quite there. I think, Neil and I have sort of been pontificating on this in the last couple of calls, so we won't get too deep into it, but there's one more step or maybe a couple more steps for us to truly deliver, especially if we look through this paradigm of no code.
Yeah, that's another question that 𝗏𝗏𝗁 brought up today as well, of like, why are you here exactly? Like, what are you doing? So that's another like input really that can help us like carry around that, of like, why are you even making this video to begin with? Like, what's the purpose of the video? And then you can kind of figure out from there like where to go.
I mean, I think the biggest problem I have with questions like that is, I think the problem is realistically how many people are and I guess that's one of those things, like we can put it in a non-intrusive way and then just bank on 1% of people, let's say, submitting a response. But as a company, or from a data point perspective, I almost feel like we need to just what's the term I'm looking, like induce or deduce like insights for ourselves as to what these people, because part of the reason people are coming to us, right, is I think we're we're starting to see patterns. For example, if someone lands on X page and they start doing a specific action, maybe having that additional data point that's not what are you trying to do, but let's say it is something that's more vague, but it's like, your job title, or what do you do for work, right? Something like that, like marketer, data scientist. Like we had questions like that in our onboarding, but maybe now instead of that form, right, instead of adding an extra point of friction, it's like, I believe Vatzel said, maybe bring up the question like 2 days in, when someone's like been on the platform for 48 hours. And what are those questions that we ease people into that give us additional information, but don't require too much input from their end? Because, you think about like a survey, like no matter how much I enjoy a product or how much a product like annoyed me, like if there's a giant text box there, I'm just gonna be like skip, right? So like it's almost like a useless field in like 98% of cases, and in my opinion. So instead, if we make it more about a one click for them instead of type out something, what are those maybe additional data points that we need that'll help us, make a bit more of an informed guess or guesstimate as to what these people are trying to get done. And like job title might be one of them. Maybe industry might be another one. And we can, maybe it's up to us to actually go in there and like take a look and figure out what is it that these people want, and how do we build it for them so that the next time they're in, we can actually be like, hey, is this what you're trying to do? And then they click it, and then it, let's say, populates a dedicated flow that is totally personalized to, or as personalized as we can make it to their end goal or the end result. I'm always just wary about like big text boxes when we ask people for like, just give them free reign. I feel like we're less likely to get a response versus giving them a focused response. Because at least, and obviously both ways, maybe with a focused response, we'll still get bullshit answers, right? But I still feel like it's less of a point of friction for a person like trying out the platform, or just trying to get their job done, whatever that might be. And I'm not sure what you guys think on that as well.
No, that makes sense. I think maybe my question's a bit too open-ended. It's easier just to get something, again, as I said even earlier than that, like less and less input. It's probably you want to get more inputs altogether.
Thing is, though, there is what I've seen throughout my short, reckless career has been like the more that someone puts in the time up front, the bigger that investment is made. So like I was talking about what I would give this like Google Doc to prospective clients at 6.5. And sometimes I would give that Google Doc and they would answer those questions with like heartfelt, this is what I'm trying to solve and here's everything. And those would always become the best clients. They would always become the most valuable clients. The ones that look at that doc and don't fill it out and then keep calling and say, hey, when can I start? Those don't, you know what I mean? They're not willing to put in the effort to clarify what success is. And so then the relationship is not as strong and the value creation is not as strong. So, Neil and I should have talked about it a little bit last week, but we had, you were here too, like we had that sprint moving request to quote form, and that was a massive form, but it's like they had a big problem and they needed to fill that out. And that then converted at 70% because the investment of time was made in there. So I agree, there's like this, difficult balance, and not to reiterate on last week of what we're trying to know, but just to also drive an example of this is this recorder that we have. So embeddable recorder, type it in Google. Hopefully you see it number one. Click on that. And the thing that we're seeing is that there are many different roles or job titles that are even using that specific function. So we've seen someone from a teacher trying to capture recordings from students. We've seen a marketing agency trying to capture recordings for the client, research firms trying to do sort of scale their, customer voice of the customer without having to do one-on-one interviews. And, Neil, I'm not sure about this, but generally I don't think people are self-representing who they are in those search queries. So if I'm a teacher, I'm not saying, I'm a teacher who needs to capture recordings. All I'm typing in is capture recordings. Mm-hmm. And so we are, we're not seeing that, and so then we can't definitively identify unless someone then reaches out and says, hey, I'm a teacher, I'm looking to capture recordings, blah, blah, blah. And I also don't know if we, for example, built out pages and we said, hey, capture recordings as a researcher, capture recordings as a teacher, capture as a marketer. I don't know if those would actually attract organic traffic or not, because people are just looking for the capture recording at a base. So that's sort of like a hypothesis I have, but also I think a challenge that we're sort of facing in this regard.
Yeah, but I almost feel like, from our end, if we do have additional data points, maybe it's almost up to us to do the bucketing ourselves and be like, okay,
Yeah.
here is, teacher A, here is researcher B, here is business person C, and then kind of think about, just based on our experience, right? Like how, in general, because all we can really do is generalize for now, is in general, how do these particular groups tend to use this solution, right? And then how do we build this solution for this group of people? So if, one thing that's interesting now is, like, when I think about it, it's, you look at this embeddable recorder solution, and within the podcast community, one thing that is very, people talk about user or listener voicemails, right? So that's kind of how they're maybe looking, like voicemail software for podcasts, let's say. That's what they're looking for. So it's not quite a voicemail. Like, we don't think of it as a voicemail, but if, let's say, this particular group of individuals is looking for it as a voicemail software, and we're trying to attract more of these individuals, maybe that's the kind of language we should be using when talking to them, right? Obviously, the solution exists as this one thing, but here is how these different groups of people actually look for it as well.
I don't know if this no code is the I said this the other day, but like the wedge that gets us through sometimes our maybe what people would define as lack of focus on specific industries and job titles. Like, I don't know if this is truly the wedge that gets us through, but I've also seen, I hope you guys have felt it too, in the last, since the start of 2022, less friction, less friction in selling, less friction in signups, better conversations, and value created in a way that's validating that, and maybe this is setting us in the wrong direction, I hope not, but like validating that our system does create value for multiple use cases and industries and job titles. And maybe the no code part is the thing that ties that all together. And I think it's also where we are looking at, like, there's no challenge in us, for example, testing this, which is, why don't we have a, I know you probably know this is coming, like, why don't we have a page dedicated around voicemail software for maybe it's not that specific term, but, to have a little landing page that's, with that in the URL structure with some content around that, show how the recorder works and the benefits of it specifically for podcasters trying to do that. And then maybe linking to the main page. Like, as long as we can scale up that growth of these pages, and it's not like eating up our entire capacity as a team. And I know we're going to start to work on this a little bit more next week, and I hope we can focus it in the right direction. There's not as long as these pages and content is done properly, there's not that much of a risk for us. It's another experiment that we're running to see where does this point, and again, with the focus to be how can we drive relevant qualified leads and use cases, and say get our signups to 100 a day, hopefully with a little bit more of qualified users coming in, and then use that information and those flows to then continue the optimization of conversion rates and software MRR and all the other things that drive our business there. So, maybe Nihal and Lauren, if you have any questions about this process, because it is something we're undertaking next week, is like the question that Nihal and I've asked is like, how do we scalably build out well-optimized landing pages to help us grow? I don't know, Lauren, if you have any thoughts, or maybe Nihal, a little bit about this process as you've tried to pull this all together.
Is there any no-code solutions?
We're working on it. Well, we use Elementor on our website. Sorry for anyone who hates Elementor. We hate it ourselves sometimes. And it's actually where Nihal and I are facing a little bit of a roadblock, because we're trying to, basically deploy these pages as quick as possible. And Elementor is a little bit of a blocker in that. But the idea for you is to be able to plug and play without really any need for code. You're going to be able to contribute to this task.
What's the problem with Elementor? Just have to like kind of post the pages one at a time. You can't just bulk open.
So if you remember last week, you helped me curate that CSV that then we imported into the website, allowed us to deploy like 35 podcasts at once. And I'm lying, it was 32. But the thing was, we didn't build those out in Elementor pages. All we did was embed basically HTML into a standardized, basically the standard WordPress HTML sort of deployment. So that sounded confusing. I'm sorry. There's a default, what's the term? WYSIWYG, whatever builder.
Yeah. What you
and
see is what you get.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. So that we embedded that, and really we weren't even trying to optimize the page that much. We were just wanting to get the podcast to populate to different podcast engines. In this case, 𝗕𝗏 and I, our goal is to still build well-designed landing pages that are nicely templated and laid out. But Elementor won't let us, at least in our current, I can't find the solution right now, is to say upload a CSV where we are putting the topic into the CSV and then it's automatically generating that content. So that's a little bit of our blocker right now. Ideally, you and I and 𝗕𝗏 and a couple other people helping us out with this process, we just write it, drop it into a row in a CSV, we hit import, all those pages are ready to go, but that's not quite there yet.
Which is fine. Like I think, the only, we've seen other sites do something similar, and part of their ability to maybe do that with ease just comes from the fact that their website's like custom coded, right? Like it's just I think built on like Gatsby or like Ruby on Rails, something like that, right? So everything on their site is HTML. They don't actually seem to be using any plugins or page builders. So I think this ability for them would be quite a bit easier, which is why they have like 2,000 pages or something.
It's crazy. And it's paid off for them.
It's paid off,
exactly, in terms of traffic, right?
Yeah. But it's fine. I mean, in our situation, we don't really have that means. So if we're not able to maybe automate that part, it's just a bit of grunt work that's required from our side, which is fine, right? Like adds in an extra X number of hours to the total process, but you just kind of do that once every couple months or once every month, and it should be.
We're doing 100 pages a day, and
because Google's not going to ding us.
Yeah. Well, the other part is like that's why I actually I used to use Divi. I was a Divi fanboy when I was first building websites because I could, that structure that I built out and like sort of custom Divi theme, I could replicate that for clients and create a pretty nice website. But then Divi, they generated the entire interface with shortcodes. And so if you ever wanted to get rid of Divi, it was garbage.
Yeah.
Like at least Elementor, it's actually HTML. And it's just got some classes that are defined by Elementor. So if we ever say want to transfer from Elementor to our own custom built site, which I hope happens one day, as much as we talked about no code solutions, is that we can make that transfer pretty, not perfectly easy, but it's not going to be like it is with Divi where you're literally looking at a mess.
Okay. So I mean, to this point, like, now basically starting next week, we're going to have a little team debrief, kind of see how we go about pushing out, I think right now, let's see, 2, 3, 9 times 3. So let's say about, I'm still working on like a master list, but sitting at around 45 or something pages, more or less. Like obviously once we actually clean it up, or once I clean it up, some of the topics might end up being subtopics, like things like that. But let's say 30 to 50 pages that we will do this kind of test run with. And then
good process,
It's like I've been playing around with trying to up my Excel skills, because there's no single solution to this. But one thing that I've been, because especially as we bring people that are totally capable but just don't have experience necessarily doing this kind of work, it's like there's certain steps that I'm trying to automate so that they just have a template served to them on a nice little platter where they just go do a couple clicks, copy paste, and then they're good to go, instead of them having to actually replicate the process that I do to get all this data, right? So getting there slowly. I've been dedicating playing around with some concatenation, like trying to figure out. I've kind of figured out how to build search queries and pull like URLs from SERP results in Google Sheets, which is kind of fun, but still not super clean, not as clean as I'd like it to be. But
concat.
yeah, exactly. But because like the way the queries are formatted, right? It's like void, and I'm sure it's simpler. It's just me not having that knowledge, but it's like you got to do like each individual word, let's say in a keyword, when it comes into the query, it's separated by a plus, right? So it's like right now I basically have first word, then a box with plus sign, then second word, then box with plus sign, right? So it's kind of like, how do I manage that without necessarily, actually I can just keep one plus sign, right? Like one box with plus sign, and then just keep using that cell. That actually, now that I talk about it, that might be a better way of doing it. Okay.
I'm confused.
Okay. I mean, I can just share real quick. So for example, let's say here, right? So this is basically the like the way these queries on Google search are structured, right? It's search Q equals whatever the keyword is. So currently, it's like I broke it up like this. And then this is like an API, like a add-on I'm using that's import from web. And this is basically pulling the top 10 searches.
Interesting. Very
SERP
cool.
in here, right? So it's like, let's say we bring Lauren in and I'm like, hey, Lauren, like we're creating a page for mic recorder. So instead of Lauren having to, take mic recorder, search in Google search, look at the top 10 results, or, click each link. Now the links are already presented from here in order of like how they appear in SERP. So, that would hopefully speed up kind of the quick competitor, like what are other people searching for? Or like, what are the top ranking results? What type of content is on those pages? And then, he can like tell me, oh, like this page idea that you were thinking of creating might not be sufficient because like, we're just doing a basic landing page, but the page that ranks is a 2,000 word blog post, right? So just optimizing that process. But, that's like V2, that's something that's going to be ongoing. As a quick sneak peek, like for our kind of just list of landing pages, it's just going to be like this, right? So we're just going to have a bunch of, is Tyler frozen? Oh, okay. Yeah, we're just going to have a list, like top line topics, and then a list of sub pages that go there as well. So that's kind of
so Excel is on the LinkedIn skill
now, right?
So I thought my mom was a CPA and like Excel was growing up, and I used to watch it. Yeah, I think I've said that before, but this was so boring. I'm like, this sucks. Why would you want to do this? And then now I see what she was seeing, or like why she actually enjoyed it so much. Like it's so beautiful, and it really is. Probably one of the greatest no-code tools ever made, to sort of to loop that back around. But then you can bring like awe-inspiring complexity into it too, and build entire things around it. So
there's like there's an app I think called Glide, or a website. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. So it's another no-code solution, but it's interesting in that it basically just like their whole pitch is turn spreadsheets into software. Right. So it's like you basically fill out a database, add in app components, and then pull in data for those app components from a database. Right. So it's a very, very neat and simple idea there.
Do you have, maybe just to help anyone who watches this who's trying to think about this process, like I hope that one day we are the great example of this, who built out these pages and relinquished, celebrated victory as it all works out. But I guess any companies that you think have sort of deployed this strategy to success?
I mean, I'd say that most, it's tough, right? Because I think at a certain point, companies don't have to do this kind of mass generation of page, because like they're kind of high quality, well-researched, well-documented content that they create generates more than enough traffic, for them. But, I think we've talked about them before, but, our kind of competitors, adjacents in the space, like 𝗵𝗵, for example, they've done this at scale in an incredibly impressive way. I think 𝗲𝗏 is another one that has done something similar and has had good success with it. Obviously, I think they live in slightly more simple spaces where competitive spaces, but the kind of end value proposition is very easy to understand, right? Like in 𝗕𝗄𝗄 case, it's just, hey, come transcribe things. And then in 𝗲𝗏's case, it's you need to edit videos, right? So for us, we're in this kind of space where it's like, hey, we give you all of these things, just your kind of use case might require a bit more kind of complexity to really maximize the system, right? So
never enough traffic, Neil. Never enough traffic.
Never enough traffic. Never enough users. Like now that we've been seeing, this growth, this kind of sustained growth in our kind of daily user acquisition too. That's a nice little confidence boost, kind of showing that we're on the right track. Now we just gotta keep that going.
You get impatient as a business owner. And I know you're sort of, you've been here for quite a while. You're almost coming up on a year, now.
10 months.
Lauren and I and 𝗏𝗁 have been banging away at this for a long time. And I would say we're probably only starting to see some of the rewards now. And not even, not everything that we want to see. And, so I'm, working through my own things right now of like, Tyler, first of all, you're not even 30. So have some patience, you know what I mean? Like wait for this. And if you actually look at the trajectory of what we're on, it's a good one, so just like have faith in the mission, have faith in the process, be patient, celebrate the wins. That's why I told 𝗏𝗁 not to turn off my new user emails, because I get high off my own supply all day as every every new sign up comes in. But I'm really glad, and you've made a big impact on that, Neil, and I think even just Lauren, like, I know I'm really enjoying, like you did a weekly presentation today, and sort of like, I feel like it's more focused to end the week. It's a great way to end the week and sort of prioritize the right things. And overall, it was a really good week. So I'm happy to see this continue, and look forward to just continuing to optimize. And one last part I said to this, it was really interesting. It was all in one, this week in podcast or startups. Maybe you listened to it, Neil, but it was with 𝗕𝗏𝗏, I believe his name is, and Jason yesterday. They were talking about Facebook and sort of the problem that Facebook has right now, which is they can't buy new companies. They have a bad reputation, and they need to create. And creating or innovation is not in the DNA of Facebook. They just buy things.
They just buy
and they're
copy.
optimized.
They buy copy.
They buy copy and optimize. He said basically like the whole team is a bunch of optimizers. And it was just really interesting, because I thought, like, there is a stage where we have gone through this initial, maybe it's not quite that, but like 0 to 1, which is like 0 customers, no product, nothing, to something that in most cases is pretty serviceable value platform if used by the right people in the right case. And so now, in a way, we're never going to stop innovating and creating, but it's also this time to optimize. It's time to figure out what's working, what's not, and focus on some of these business metrics that take us to the next levels. And so I'm grateful to have a team that can execute on that. And I sort of told that, so like March, although we'll continue to build things, is like optimization month. Let's break this a level further and continue to sort of test and experiment and figure out what else we can do to make these wins happen.
Yeah, and it would be great, like even from like a marketing and growth side, to kind of work with 𝗏𝗁 on, integrating some of our ideas into the product as well. Yeah.
Cool. Lauren, any final words, sir?
Yeah, just on the topic of optimizing, I think it's, you kind of have, you're building it from scratch. You kind of have your own perspective on it, but I think optimizing really comes into effect when you have someone else come in and like provide their own perspective and see like where things may be going wrong here or there. Did you guys ever feel that from either like Tim or 𝗏𝗏? Do you think that they provide like a more of an optimized mindset, like any good advice of what we're doing right or wrong? Or do you find like optimization comes better from advisors, or where do you feel like it's best appreciated?
I mean, Tim at its core is a creative, like he's obviously very technically creative, but wants to push innovation. I would say a little bit of this transition that we had was when Leon came in and said, focus on some of these things. Now, do we execute those things properly? Probably not, to be honest, but the focus I think the idea of it, or the vision of trying to do that, helped us and is now more paying dividends now, as we like look back and realize what went right, what went wrong, and what steps we can take to make optimization. So I think, it's crazy because you talk about this as a marketer, like, oh, I can get you a click from a Google ad, but unless your landing page is optimized, it doesn't matter. And then you don't live up to your own principles, like it's weird how hypocritical you are giving advice versus doing the things that you would be giving the advice on. And, I'm trying to take that to heart now. And I think we've actually done a good job, and the focus has, at least in the early stage of 2022, shown that it has an impact if we do put some focus on it. So I think 𝗍𝗲 is a big optimizer. Not he can create too, but whether it's messaging or how we position or those things, those make a impact, because there's a little bit of
Not afraid to fight you.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And like, I mean, I'm working constantly on it myself. I'm a little sporadic sometimes, and I'm doing my best, but you need that outside focus or someone who has experience doing that to tailor things down or give that pushback. And I've accepted that pushback, and most times I don't get that mad at 𝗍𝗲.
Yeah, I mean, I think for optimize, like, no matter your role or like what your work you're doing, I think there's always times when you kind of fall into a rut or fall into a routine. You kind of just do the status quo. And I think sometimes just having that external kick or that external pressure, definitely, even if you don't necessarily agree with the perspective, I think that it gets you to start thinking about, okay, like if, this person feels this way, why do they maybe feel this way? And like, what are maybe things I can try out, even if I'm not, 100% convinced that it's going to work. Without necessarily getting rid of everything that you've worked on, or like, your kind of workflows or the way you function as a person. So, I mean, I've actually thought about this just even from a, like marketing and promotion of the app as well. It's like, okay, like what is the, because for example, like SaaS marketing is also something that's new to me. So it's like, where are like my blind spots, right? Like, what are these areas that I'm not maybe thinking about? Because, to me, it's like, maybe it's not even in my realm of possibilities, but it's something we could totally do, right? And, we've kind of had, like even like 𝗲𝗁's come in and said things where it's like, oh, like we can do that, right? Like that was my reaction, where it's like, in my head, it seems like, no, I don't want to like bother, the dev team with implementing something. But at the end of the day, if it actually optimizes the business, optimizes conversion, and helps us grow overall, like, why would someone else on the team be opposed to it necessarily, right? And especially for trying new things, I think as long as there's not a lot of friction or lost effort in some of the initiatives, I feel like there's more opportunity for us to also maybe just figure out how to experiment more and like release different things more, right? And like kind of ship and then think more, right? Like I don't know if like Iman from Terrain, right? Like I don't know if you saw on Product Hunt the other day, but they released like a Chrome extension, right? For YouTube. And it's like, it's barely been like 3 months or 2 months since they released their kind of main platform, right? And it's like, obviously they're on a different trajectory, different market, whatever it is that maybe enables them to do that. But within our scope, what are things that we can maybe even help 𝗲𝗁 kind of conceptualize or think about or build out, right? That we can integrate into our platform and share with our users, share with new users, and continue to get people excited about what we're building here and what we're trying to do, right? Like, and I think some of these strides towards like templatization and cleaner insights, more useful insights, whatever those are all elements that until they're realized, we'll kind of just like dream about them. But then once we actually realize them, then we can even optimize those further, right? So it's just this ladder that we build upon.
They were the YouTube Notes Product Hunt.
Yes.
Oh, that was a great. Oh, I like that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I told Vassal for truly embracing this no code piece that we gotta do the Android and iOS applications. But then I started like looking around and like say 70 competitor apps, and I'm like, man, these reviews are brutal. Like in the App Store and Play Store, just because you're opening the scrutiny of a different type of ire of customers. You know what I mean? Who want to pay $2.99 for an app forever, that's the other risk I sort of saw. Like, whew, this is like, again, I sort of like a revolution of what's possible in some of these products, and people are saying this is too expensive and this is bullshit. And it's like, wow, that's tough.
I think part of the, and we talked about this last year, but I think the, same thing with like something like Google Chrome, right? Where I think the power of any extension you release shouldn't be your kind of monetization tool. That is 100% a growth tool, right? So you might lose money on it, you might like bleed customers on it, whatever it is, but that is literally, hey, here's one element that helps you explore this larger system that we've built for you. And even when I just do some keyword research, right? Like people look for things like Chrome extension, Google Meet transcription, like things like that, right? Where it's like, if we can, let's say, bring the transcription element or even just the recording element into a Chrome extension, now we let people, let's say, capture audio from anywhere without having to build out an app necessarily. Right?
Yeah.
And now, but then it's like, okay, if you want to access your transcript archive, maybe within the Chrome extension, they can just download, right? Kind of like we do with the voice recorder page, or you can record, you can download without ever necessarily going into speak. But now let's say you actually want to build out a repository and take advantage of like the analytics and analysis of all these things you're recording. Now you have a motivating factor to actually click into the app, explore what the app has to offer, and then possibly using that in addition to this Chrome extension. So I think the Chrome extension lets you live closer to where people are doing their work, right? But then the app is where they go to do maybe slightly deeper work and deeper analysis. So I think that's an interesting, way to do it.
Person asked us if we had an integration for Chime, Amazon Chimes, like conferencing. I'm like, no one uses that. But anyways, that's there. And then the one last thing, I just talked into our recorder the other day, because we have one on our site. Maybe it's the embeddable recorder page, and it's just like a bunch of recordings of people being like, hello, hello, like saying hi to us through the recorder on the demo page that we have, which it's sort of hilarious to listen back to. Yeah. So, this was good. Anything else before we close this out? We hit the time. I'm happy with that conversation. Good.
We're good.
Okay. Beautiful.
Happy Family Day.
Oh yes, this is
for the Ontarians and New
okay.
Brunswickans.
Love you all. There's something going on in the US too. Everyone's got a holiday. I don't know. I'm lying. I have no idea. I just made that up. But thank you for everyone who tunes in. We appreciate this a lot. This is Office Hours episode 53, and a lot of good things on the go. And hope everything is well in your life too.